Hey, and welcome. My name is Guenther, and this is Better Make Music. In this video series, I'm going to show you how to take your beats from beginner to next level. I got 4 videos full of cool and really helpful things to show you, but before we get started, if I could have about a minute of your time for a couple questions and some necessary info for you, it'll save us a lot of time and confusion later on. First question, do your beats look and sound like this? The beginner jumps right into the chorus. Maybe it has a quick little intro. You notice the unsmooth dissonance? There's no real transitions, everything's sudden. Good basic sense of drum arrangement though. You get the idea. It's not bad, but the problem is there just isn't all that much going on. It's still just a basic loop, and a basic loop doesn't get you radio play or millions of streams. And if your goal is to do anything bigger than just have a little fun in your DAW, you're gonna need to level up your skills as a producer. But that's why I'm here. And this is how this video series is gonna work. What I've got for you today is 2 beats, the beginner and the intermediate. Then over the course of these 4 videos, I'm gonna show you how to turn basic and boring into amazing and scoring. But Marcus, why 4 videos? Because, my young people, I'm gonna show you everything I did, and that's way too long not to split up. So let's not waste your time. These videos are made for you if you can make a solid beginner level beat. That means a copy-pasted and arranged loop. If that's not you yet, go and get comfortable with that first and then come back. Otherwise, these videos will be too advanced. If you're still with me, congrats. It means that you've gotten all the beginner stuff down. Becoming a better producer will get more streamlined from here on out. Next, I'll play you the intermediate beat. But first, let's take it back to 2013 for a second. Everybody's wearing Beats and Snapchat best friends have got everybody in trouble. People hit the Nene, Miley the VMAs, and Kanye aka Yeezus finally discovers Twitter. You remember Vines? Well, who doesn't remember the Harlem Shake or Waka Flocka No Hands? And suddenly, out of nowhere, Kanye and like half the relevant rap game decide to go and drop Mercy. Remember Chief Keef? You back with me? Simple times, am I right? Now listen to this. There's a full fleshed out melody in a part that would have no lyrics. You hear those chords, how they complement it and give some rhythm? And what about that filtered kick? It's slowly opening. And the hi-hats in the background? And then? You'll hear the rest later. Essentially goes from there and ends with this anthemic kind of outro. But now, my last question to you though is how? How do they connect? How do you take a beginner loop and turn it into an intermediate beat? For this beat, there's 8 distinct things that you can copy or come to understand that'll take you there. But if you take nothing away from this video, recognize this. In a nutshell, the beginner already has everything that music needs, which is also why I said it gets more streamlined. Because the foundations are set. Now we're just refining and developing. The relevant question for you now is, how strong, how clear, and how specific can you make the vibe and story of your beat? So that brings us to number 1, which is chords. Most of your heavy lifting will happen here, which is to say that if you can learn to nail this, and you will, it'll make the biggest difference out of these 8. That's because chords and rhythm make up the backbone of any song. Those alone will determine about 80% of your beat, if not more. Look at the beginner beat. In the chord patterns, the chords might have a bit of rhythm, maybe a couple melody notes. They might look like this or like that, but at the end of the day, they're still just block chords. And as an intermediate, this no longer flies because chords play too big a role in the vibe, story, movement, and rhythm of your beats to ignore, especially if you consider that there are so many options for how you can write chords. You can arpeggiate them, make arpeggio melodies, strum them, build them up, change chords one note at a time. You can put them like this, you can change the rhythm, interlock them. I think you get the idea. You can even mix and combine all of these to create more elaborate and layered results. Block chords as your one and only default are a no. So starting with the beginner beat, what did I do? The first thing I did was take the guitar and the chords 2 pattern, they're the same, and I gave them a rhythm I liked and made sure that they worked with the drums. This pattern in the end is a mix of building up the chord and a simple chord melody. Then I took the organ, chopped the chords in half, and took that middle note and slid it over by 1 beat, making it an interlocking pattern. I've never heard anyone call it that before, but it makes sense to me. From there, I took that pattern and copied it over to another sound. Then I took those chords and copied them down an octave to make the chords sound fuller. Minus a couple details that we'll get to as we get further into these 8, those are the intermediate chords. That brings us to number 2, which is the melodies. And generally speaking, that's something that the beginner and the beginner beat hasn't really figured out. Now's the time to change that. But how? In the beginner beat, there's the hook melody. Beyond that, the guitar and chords too do have those 3 melody notes to help that loop, but that's it. It can be okay at first so the artist knows where to put their vocal, but at a certain point, you're gonna need to add a melody, whether it's a counter melody to that vocal, a fill, or a melody for an instrumental section. But how do you do that? How do you write a melody like that? It's actually pretty simple. Everyone can make some sort of melody, right? However long you can comfortably make that melody, next time you make one, just double your expectation. And then as quickly as you can comfortably do it, just rinse and repeat until you're satisfied. If you want an actual number though, an 8-bar melody will do you just fine. If you're on the other end of things and like going deep, a good melody can never be too long. Just remember that certain styles of music do prefer shorter melodies. Also, if that's you, looking into sentence and period forms will help you a lot. They're the 2 textbook forms that melodies will take. They'll help them sound more organized and intentional. Back to the beat, this is what I did. It's a little sad to have such a dinky melody sitting on top of this whole beat, so I moved it to the verse where it can give some color to a section that's essentially just some chords and drums. Then, as you can see here and here, I added these 2 new melodies to give the whole beat some more movement, right? That way it sounds like the beat's moving forward because it actually always is. You'll hear the melodies later, but for now this is the MIDI. Though there is one specific and important trick to making these 3 melodies work in the beat, and if you don't have this down, it just won't sound right. This should never happen for real, but I'll play you all 3 melodies at the same time. You tell me if you hear what it is. So, what did you notice? Did you notice how they almost work as each other's counters? The whole idea here is that the melodies are similar. They're different enough so that they can sound new and be satisfying, but they're not so different that they make the beat sound disconnected or like 3 different beats. The whole point here is how different can you make the same melody sound? That's both a skill and an art form. Beyond that, I changed the main layer of the melody in what we're going to call the chorus. That way the end of the chorus sounded more final or complete. It also helped it transition into the verse. More on transitions later, that's part number 6. There's a lot more I could tell you about melodies and melody writing, but that's kind of beyond the scope of this video. If you like it simple, do what sounds good. If you like it more specific, make sure to take your melody and check it against your chords. That way you can make sure it's consonant, or that if there are dissonances, those dissonances are wanted. Beyond that, the only thing really worth saying on melodies is that the melody repeats in little phrases. It makes it so that it can be understood more easily. Next is number 3, automations. Before, I touched on the amount of automations in the intermediate beat, and as a comparison in the beginner beat, not a single one. And granted, that may not always be the case, but it probably will be more often than it isn't. And it's not that more automations is automatically or always better, it's that as an intermediate, you're good enough at making beats that the effort to do it or to learn where and when to do it makes sense, especially because you'll need automations to smooth out little inconsistencies as well as make bigger changes, like when you go from a verse to a chorus, for example. In the case of this beat, there's a lot of automations. And a lot of times there will be. Again, good music is made with an attention to detail. And on that note, be that intentional about things. It's just worth it in the end. At the same time though, it's like if you look at these automation clips, they're not really that complicated or crazy. And a lot of times they won't be, or don't have to be, but it does happen. For example, these are from other beats where something more complicated was needed. But for our intermediate beat here, they're all pretty simple and subtle. Really, there's only 3 reasons why the ones that aren't simple weren't. 1, specific volume automations were needed when things poked out too much or were too hidden. 2, they were special one-time sounds that I had to mold in, right? That would be the risers and whatnot. Also the one reversed 808 tremoloed volume swell. That's a mouthful. And 3, they were parts or sounds that happened in the intro. In the intro, I automated a couple EQs and volume stuff. Also 1 instance of gross beat for the tape stop on the chords at the end here. In the end, basically every sound had an automation on it because the intro was so simple it needed more movement to reinforce it. To be honest, in hindsight, I probably made the intro a little bit too simple. To keep this from becoming a mountain of information, let's wrap up the first video here. But I'll leave you with this. Think about what we talked about and see how it starts to play itself out in your beats going forward. Also, and I can't stress this enough, these are the foundations of beats and beat making, like I touched on. And having this stuff down pat will make the rest of these videos easier to understand and will make you get better faster. If you're still watching, a like and a comment helps me and the channel out a lot. I'd appreciate that. So with that, I'm looking forward to our next little session. So remember, if you want to make music better, better make music. Until then.